Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're exploring something we all deal with: attention. Or, more accurately, how to stop it from running our lives and make it work for us.
The challenge in today's world, wouldn't you say?
Totally. You know me, I love to learn new things. So you can imagine my excitement when I saw the sources you sent over: research articles, productivity tips, and even a few chapters from Chris Bailey's Hyperfocus. That book had me hooked from page one. I'm really eager to get into it all today.
Bailey's work is fantastic, and you've provided some great supporting material. The combination will really allow us to dig deep into the mechanics of attention, which is the first step to mastering it.
Speaking of mechanics, one of the first things that really resonated with me was Bailey's concept of autopilot mode. It's like we go through huge chunks of our day just reacting to whatever's in front of us instead of being intentional about where our focus goes.
And what's fascinating is how often we don't even realize we're in autopilot mode until we snap out of it. Scrolling through social media, refreshing our inboxes. Have you ever caught yourself doing something like that and wondered, how did I even end up here?
All the time, it's like you suddenly look up and realize you've lost an hour,
Yeah.
but you can't even remember what you just did, do you? And it's not just social media. Sometimes I catch myself doing busy work that doesn't even need to get done.
Just because it's comforting to be in motion.
Exactly. And that mindless activity can actually be a huge energy drain. Think of it this way: your attention is like a spotlight. You can only shine it on one thing at a time. But when you're in autopilot mode, that spotlight is flickering all over the place, illuminating nothing well.
Okay. I love that spotlight analogy. So if we want to be more intentional with our attention, the first step is recognizing when we're letting it run wild. But how do we actually start directing it where we want it to go? Well, that's where understanding attentional space comes in. It's our brain's limited capacity for holding and processing information. Think of it like a stage in a theater. There's only so much room for actors and scenery. If you try to cram too much on stage, it gets crowded and chaotic.
So if our attentional space is that stage, trying to multitask is like having five different plays happening at once. No wonder it feels so overwhelming.
Precisely. And here's where things get really interesting. Bailey talks about something called attention residue. It's this idea that even when we switch tasks, bits and pieces of the previous task linger in our minds. So even if you physically moved on, your attention is still partially stuck back there.
Have you ever felt this? Like, I finished a stressful work call this morning, but I swear I could feel my attention being pulled back to it for hours afterwards, even though I was trying to focus on something else.
That's attention residue in action. And research suggests it can have a real impact on our decision-making and problem-solving abilities. So it's not just about feeling scattered. It can actually affect the quality of our work.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense. So if multitasking creates this mental clutter through attention residue, what's the alternative? Is it really better to just focus on one thing at a time?
That's exactly what Bailey suggests. And it's backed by research. Counterintuitive as it may seem, focusing on one task at a time is often far more productive. Not only are you giving that task your full attention, but you're also avoiding that attention residue buildup that comes with constantly switching gears.
This is where Bailey's concept of hyperfocus comes in, right? It's about intentionally directing all of your attention towards a single task. And he doesn't just say it's helpful. He gives actual examples of how even short bursts of hyperfocus can be surprisingly productive.
It's amazing what we can accomplish when we eliminate distractions and allow ourselves to truly engage with a task. Writers who hit their word counts in record time, designers who crack complex problems in a flash of insight. It's about accessing that flow state where you become completely absorbed in what you're doing.
And Bailey provides a whole arsenal of practical tactics for taming distractions and achieving that state of hyperfocus. One of the simplest, but perhaps most impactful, is putting your phone out of sight.
Think about it. Our phones are practically designed to steal our attention. Notifications, updates, those tempting little red bubbles. They're constantly vying for our focus.
Ugh, don't even get me started on those red bubbles. They're like a siren song for my attention. And it's not just about resisting the urge to check them. Even when we're not actively using our phones, just having them within sight can create this subconscious pull on our attention.
That's why Bailey suggests putting your phone in a drawer, another room, or even just turning it face down. It's about removing those visual cues that trigger that automatic check my phone response.
What about you? What's your biggest distraction kryptonite? I have a feeling I know what mine is.
Well, I have to admit, email can be a real productivity black hole for me. It's so easy to get sucked into that vortex of inbox zero and lose hours without even realizing it.
Oh, tell me about it. Email is definitely my Achilles heel too. It feels productive. But sometimes I end up just spinning my wheels. Bailey has a whole section in the book on email mastery with strategies for taming that beast right.
He does. He suggests checking email less frequently, using the five-sentence rule for replies, basically keeping your emails short and to the point, and even taking email holidays.
An email holiday. I'm intrigued. What exactly does that entail?
It's exactly what it sounds like. You set an autoresponder, letting people know you'll be off email for a specific period, and provide alternative contact information for urgent matters. It's a great way to carve out chunks of uninterrupted time for focused work.
That's brilliant. I might have to give that a try. Another area where Bailey encourages us to be more intentional with our attention is meetings. We all know how much time can get wasted in meetings, especially those that aren't well organized or have a clear purpose.
And so often, we attend meetings out of habit or obligation, not because they're truly necessary for our work. It's like we're on autopilot again,
Mm.
accepting meeting invites without really considering if they're the best use of our time and attention. Have you ever felt that way?
Absolutely. Especially when you get that meeting invite with a vague subject line and 20 people CC'd you, you're like, do I really need to be here?
Exactly. And that's where the meeting audit comes in. Bailey suggests challenging the attendance list. Do all those people really need to be there? And he talks about setting clear agendas, sticking to time limits, and making sure there's a clear purpose for every meeting.
So instead of just automatically hitting accept on every meeting invite, we should pause and consider if it truly aligns with our goals and priorities. And if we decide to attend, how can we be more intentional with our attention during the meeting itself? I mean, sometimes it feels impossible to stay focused in a room full of people and competing priorities.
Well, you can actually apply the principles of hyperfocus to meetings as well. Leave your phone behind. Actively engage in the discussion, and try to extract as much value from the experience as possible. You might be surprised at how much more productive and insightful those meetings become when you approach them with intention.
That's great advice. It's almost like flipping the script on meetings. Instead of viewing them as a drain on our time and attention, we can see them as an opportunity to practice and strengthen our focus skills.
Exactly. It's all about shifting our mindset and approaching even the most mundane tasks with intention and awareness.
So we've talked about managing our external environment, things like our phones and meetings, but what about our internal environment? I imagine all those to-dos and worries floating around in our heads can be just as distracting as any external cue.
You're absolutely right. And that's where Bailey's advice about simplifying our internal environment comes in. It's about clearing our minds of those nagging to-dos and worries that can pull us out of focus. He recommends keeping separate lists for tasks, incoming information, and those nagging worries that pop up throughout the day.
It seems so simple, but I can see how that would be helpful. It's like giving those thoughts a designated space instead of letting them run rampant in our minds.
Exactly. The beauty of this approach is that it allows us to get those thoughts out of our heads and onto paper, which frees up our attentional space for the task at hand. It's like decluttering your mind, just like you would declutter your physical space.
And once those thoughts are safely captured on a list, you can deal with them strategically later on, instead of letting them distract you throughout the day.
Precisely. It's about taking control of your mental environment, just like you would take control of your physical workspace. Now that we've covered some of the strategies for enhancing focus, are you ready to explore the flip side of that coin, the part that really surprised me?
You mean scatterfocus. I have to admit, the idea of intentionally letting my mind wander seems a little counterintuitive when we're talking about harnessing attention, but I'm definitely ready to dive in.
That's the spirit. Let's explore the power of a wandering mind. So we've talked about hyperfocus, that laser-like focus on a single task. But what if I told you there's another type of focus, one that involves intentionally letting your mind wander? That's where scatterfocus comes in.
Okay, you've officially piqued my curiosity. I get that hyperfocus is about diving deep into a task, but how can letting your mind wander be considered a type of focus? It sounds almost like the opposite.
It might seem counterintuitive, but scatterfocus isn't about zoning out or being unproductive. It's about shifting into a different mode of thinking, one that unlocks creativity, helps us process information, and even recharges our mental energy.
It's like giving your brain permission to take a scenic route instead of always sticking to the highway.
Exactly. And sometimes those scenic routes lead to unexpected discoveries. Think about it. When was the last time you had a brilliant idea or solved a tricky problem while staring intently at a computer screen?
Honestly, the best ideas usually hit me when I'm doing something completely unrelated to work, like taking a walk or washing the dishes. It's like my mind needs that space to breathe and make connections.
That's scatterfocus at work. Bailey even conducted a boredom experiment where he forced himself to do a series of incredibly boring tasks to see what would happen.
Now that's dedication to research. So what did he discover? Did he just end up nodding off from sheer boredom?
Surprisingly, no.
Mm-hmm.
He found that boredom, this state we often try to avoid at all costs, can actually spark creativity. When our minds aren't bombarded with stimulation, they naturally start to wander, making connections and exploring new ideas.
So instead of dreading those moments of boredom, we should embrace them as opportunities for our minds to wander and make new discoveries.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective and seeing boredom not as an enemy, but as a potential ally in the quest for creativity and innovation.
That's a powerful reframing. It reminds me of those times when I've been stuck on a problem for hours, only to have the solution pop into my head while I'm in the shower or taking a walk. It's like my subconscious mind was working on it all along, and it just needed that space to surface the answer.
And this is where capturing those insights becomes crucial. Always have a notebook handy. Use the voice memo app on your phone. Or jot down those ideas as soon as they come up. You never know when a fleeting thought during Scatterfocus could turn into your next big breakthrough.
So we've got hyperfocus for diving deep and scatterfocus for letting our minds roam free. It seems like both are important. But how do they work together? It feels like they're almost opposites.
They are, and that's precisely why they complement each other so well. Think of them as two sides of the same coin. You need both to have a complete picture.
So it's not about choosing one over the other, but finding a balance between the two.
Exactly. We need periods of intense focus to get things done. But we also need those moments of mental wandering to make connections, generate ideas, and recharge our creative batteries. Bailey talks about how our brains work by clustering related pieces of information, which he calls dots. And the quality of the dots we consume, the books we read, the conversations we have, the experiences we seek out, has a huge impact on our thinking and creative potential. It's like building a mental library. The more diverse and interesting your collection, the more potential for making those aha connections.
So scatterfocus is like giving those dots the space to collide and create new constellations of meaning.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It's like those connect the dots puzzles we did as kids. At first, you just see a bunch of random dots, but as you start connecting them, a picture emerges.
And sometimes those connections lead to completely unexpected pictures, which is where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
This reminds me of something else Bailey argues in the book. The idea that geniuses are made, not born.
I love that idea. It's so empowering. We often think of geniuses as these rare, exceptional individuals who are just wired differently. But Bailey challenges that notion. He argues that it's not about inherent talent, but about dedication, practice, and intentional focus. He uses examples like Einstein and Mozart to illustrate how consistent effort and a passion for their craft played a huge role in their success.
So it's not just about having a brilliant idea, but about nurturing that idea, honing your skills,
Yeah.
and putting in the hard work to bring it to life.
Exactly. It's like cultivating a garden. You need fertile soil, the right seeds, and consistent care to reap a bountiful harvest. Even Mozart, who was composing symphonies at the age of 8, spent years diligently practicing and studying under his father's guidance. And Einstein, despite his incredible intellect, was known for his relentless curiosity and willingness to challenge conventional thinking.
It's like that saying, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. Those individuals we consider geniuses weren't just born that way. They cultivated their talents through consistent effort and a deep love for their work.
Which brings us to a fascinating connection between happiness and focus. Research shows that a positive mood can actually expand our attentional space and make us more resilient to distractions.
Wait, so you're telling me that being happy can actually make me better at focusing? That sounds almost too good to be true.
It might sound surprising, but it's backed by science. When we're feeling happy, we're literally able to hold more information in our minds and focus more effectively. It's like our brains are working optimally when we're in a positive state.
I've definitely noticed that on days when I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, it's much harder to focus. Everything feels like a distraction. But when I'm in a good mood, I can power through tasks and stay focused for longer periods.
That's exactly what the research suggests. And conversely, negativity has the opposite effect. When we're stressed, anxious, or feeling down, our attentional space shrinks, making it harder to concentrate and easier to get sidetracked. It becomes a vicious cycle. The more scattered we feel, the more likely we are to slip into negative thinking patterns.
So it's not just about powering through and trying to focus when we're feeling down. It's about recognizing that our emotional state plays a huge role in our ability to focus and be productive.
Precisely. It's about prioritizing our well-being through things like exercise, spending time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, and recognizing that those activities aren't just nice-to-haves, but essential components of a focused and fulfilling life.
This is a total game changer for me. I've always thought of happiness and productivity as separate goals,
Yeah.
but now I see how interconnected they truly are. Taking care of my emotional well being isn't just about feeling good, it's also an investment in my ability to focus, be more creative, and achieve my goals.
That's a fantastic takeaway. It's about recognizing that we're not machines. Our emotions, our well-being,
Mm.
and our ability to focus are all intertwined. So instead of seeing happiness as a reward for being productive, we can start to see it as a key ingredient for success in all areas of our lives.
Wow, we've covered so much ground today. Autopilot mode, attention residue, hyperfocus, scatterfocus, the link between happiness and focus. It's a lot to digest, but I feel like I'm starting to see attention in a whole new light.
It's a complex topic,
Mm.
but I think the key takeaway is this. The quality of our attention shapes the quality of our lives.
I love that. It's so simple yet so profound.
When we understand how our attention works, we can make conscious choices about where we direct it. And those choices have a ripple effect on everything we do. Our work, our relationships, our overall well-being.
It's like we've been given this incredible tool, but we haven't been taught how to use it effectively.
Exactly. We wouldn't expect to be able to play a musical instrument without learning the notes and practicing regularly. Attention is no different. It's a skill that can be cultivated and strengthened with practice.
Speaking of practice, Bailey suggests setting hourly awareness chimes to check in with ourselves and see where our attention is going. Have you tried that?
I have. And it's been surprisingly helpful. It's so easy to get swept up in the current of the day and lose track of where our attention is going. Those little chimes serve as gentle reminders to pause, take a breath, and ask ourselves, what am I focusing on right now? Is this where I want my attention to be?
It's like hitting the reset button on your attention and making a conscious choice about what you want to focus on next. It's empowering to realize we have that choice in every moment.
Exactly. And even if you find your attention has wandered off course, don't get discouraged. It's all part of the process. The key is to gently guide your attention back to where you want it to be, without judgment or self-criticism.
So, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling overwhelmed and doesn't know where to start? It can feel daunting to see about overhauling your entire approach to attention.
Start small. Pick one technique that resonates with you and experiment with it for a week or two. Maybe it's putting your phone out of sight for a few hours each day or scheduling dedicated pockets of time for hyperfocus. The key is to find what works for you and build from there.
That's great advice. It's about taking small steps, celebrating those wins, and gradually building those attention muscles over time.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress. Remember, even experts like myself are constantly learning and refining our approach. The journey of mastering attention is ongoing.
I love that perspective. It's encouraging to know that even those who study attention are still working on it themselves.
We're all in this together. And I think that's a hopeful message. We all have the capacity to improve our attention, and in doing so, enhance the quality of our lives. The world is designed to steal your attention, but by understanding how it works, you can take back control and direct that precious resource toward the things that truly matter.
So, to our listener, I encourage you to experiment with the techniques we've discussed today. Maybe try one of Bailey's tips for taming distractions or schedule some time for scatter focus. Remember, even small changes can yield significant results. And most importantly, be kind to yourself along the way.
That's excellent advice. Be patient with yourself. Celebrate those small victories. And remember that the journey of mastering attention is an ongoing adventure.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. Until next time, happy focusing.